Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
8:07 here on this busy Tuesday morning. Thanks for tuning into O'Connor and Company. We've got more on the Tim Walz situation, the Venezuela situation, the Mark Kelly situation, a lot of situations to stay on top of. Julie Gunlock feeling under the weather, so she's not with us this morning. You're stuck with me, but thankfully I'm now joined by Dr. Peter McCullough. We love Dr. McCullough because he pissed off all the right people during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's a badge of honor, Dr. McCullough, for that. It's nice to be vindicated after all this time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You, by the way, author of a new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, very timely considering the announcement yesterday from the Centers for Disease Control, reducing the number of diseases that children are suggested they should be immunized for. First of all, just on the facts there, 18 diseases to 11 diseases, what's at play here, and what does this mean to parents and to children?
This is a stunning development. You know, the McCullough Foundation published a report linking vaccines given in big combinations in childhood to autism. And this was published October 27th, 2025. Within 3 weeks, the CDC changes its stance on vaccines and autism. And then within 90 days, now President Trump essentially did this. He ordered acting CDC Director Jim O'Neill to do this. So it really wasn't the CDC doctors or the ACIP panel. This was a big boss move by Trump. And so the burden of vaccinations have been dramatically reduced for children now. It's in line with what's done in Scandinavia and other countries, and there's no resurgence of diseases there. And we hope that this will lessen the burden on children and ultimately result in less allergic and neuropsychiatric diseases.
Well, and listen, the comparison to other nations and Western European nations is absolutely stunning. I saw a graphic that the president put out that shows European countries, children get 11 injections. The United States, it's 72 injections. Now, the 72 injections are spread across for 18 various diseases, but that's how they're doing it now, right? They sort of the idea, I think, is that if we spread these out, that might reduce potential effects of these vaccines, but in part, that sort of exacerbates the problem, doesn't it? Because there's so many vaccinations that children have to get. Even if the dosage is lower, it still has the same kind of stuff in it, including the preservatives and other factors that aren't even associated directly with the vaccination. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, right. The two big ones, the legacy vaccines, are the measles, mumps, and rubella, and diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus. Now, those remain unchanged on the schedule, but I can tell you the research is suggesting if those are just delayed, if we get out of this critical period of neurologic development after age 4, the risks really go down with these shots. So I think we're going to see a lot more individual decision-making with doctors and parents, which should happen. This is not going to be a one-size-fits-all huge schedule for every child.
Have they also changed the schedule for this? The one thing I remember as a parent, my youngest is 18, who, by the way, youngest of 4, he is on the autism spectrum. At 18 years old, he is still nonverbal, but brilliant, graduated high school, great kid, obviously. But one thing that struck me with my children was not just the number of vaccines, but how many you were getting at once. You know, and I remember asking my pediatrician about that, and the pediatrician said, yeah, well, they do this because the recommendation is based on wanting to get as many as they possibly can at one sitting because they can't rely on parents to bring their kids back for their, semi-annual checkups. I was stunned to hear that. So has there been a change to the schedule here in spreading these out a little bit further?
Well, there's been a subtraction, so subtracting rotavirus, for instance, and RSV and influenza. There's been a subtraction. There's going to be less needles per visit. But you bring up a good point. Another way to make vaccination far safer is to go one by one, right, and not just blast them all. When all these vaccines are in the child at one time, it can raise inflammatory factors that affects the brain and ultimately causes what's called a subclinical encephalitis. And then the post-encephalitic picture is that of autism. So undoubtedly, vaccines are a trigger for autism in susceptible children.
Critics are saying that this bypassed the standard process, including the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and that there wasn't transparency involved with the data that led to this decision. Do they have a point that this did not go through the regular, proper channels that a recommendation like this normally should go through?
Well, for sure, this was a major boss move by Trump. He just bypassed all of this. I mean, come on, the ACIP panel.
Dr. McCullough, it sounds like your answer is you bet your ass they didn't go through the regular channels.
Yes, this was a boss move. The ACIP panel was in place for a year. They did little to nothing. I mean, they were perseverating over a hepatitis B shot. I think finally Trump said he looked at McCullough Foundation report, which we sent, by the way, to all the leaders in Washington, including O'Neill and Kennedy and everybody in HHS. And they looked at it and said, listen, we've got to do something. So, they did it. I think this is a shockwave across the world of vaccinology, but it's really no different than Sweden or Denmark or Norway, and things are perfectly fine there.
The American Academy of Pediatrics has now issued their own recommended schedule. And I don't know how this works. The CDC, it's a recommendation. It's not mandatory. But pediatricians are now going to be stuck in this place. It's like, all right, are we going to follow the CDC schedule? Are we going to follow what the American Academy of Pediatrics say? What are the controlling authorities here on how this goes through, other than the parent, by the way? Let's not forget parents.
Right. Well, for many medical problems, there are multiple different sets of guidelines. It's common in my field in cardiology, for instance. So there are always differing guidelines. The thing here, though, is what the CDC says becomes state law to attend school for many, many states. So it's really not the American Academy of Pediatrics, is what the CDC says.
Okay. And finally, there has been a rise in certain diseases over the last couple of years, and many people point that back toward parents opting out of vaccinations. You are seeing an uptick in measles, certainly not at any kind of like epidemic or pandemic level, but should we expect to see some increase in some of these diseases if parents are opting out, and is that something to be very concerned about?
Well, sure, case counts will go up. Remember, Mennonites and Amish and others, they don't take vaccines. So there's always some cases of measles out there. We have a small number of measles, a couple thousand cases per year. In Europe, they have like 250,000 cases. Worldwide, there's 600,000 cases. The key thing is to treat measles. High-risk patients need, nebulizers, corticosteroids, secondary antibiotics. No child should die of measles. Sure, we will see some sporadic increase in cases, but no more than what would be seen in Scandinavia, for instance.
Dr. McCullough, you started by saying that your foundation has determined links between the ubiquitous nature of these vaccines over the last couple of decades and rising rates of children diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Is that standalone research? Will the CDC be doing this research finally? Will we get some definitive answer on this rather than conflicting reports and accusations of, unscientific, fear-mongering, which we often hear when you make a statement like that?
McCullough Foundation received a grant, an independent grant. We did the most comprehensive evidence-based review of what exists on this topic. It's a dramatic increase from what the Institute of Medicine had done or the WHO. And in response to this, 3 weeks later, the CDC changed its stance on the website after they read our report and said, well, vaccines could be related to autism, and we're going to do our own report. And I said, congratulations, do your own report. The CDC has 12,000 qualified scientists, $9 billion budget, and they can't do a report?
Yeah.
So I hope they do the report.
And they haven't done the report until now because of pressure from the pharmaceutical companies? Is that right. Is that where it's coming from?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
Dr. McCullough, thank you so much for your opinion on this stuff. Always great to talk with you. Again, his book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. We encourage, as always, for all of our listeners and our family of listeners here in our audience to learn as much as you can and inform yourself. These are your children, and no one should be getting in the way of you and your decisions for your kids. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
It's 8:16.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Let's check in with America's favorite immigrant community, the Somali community. It's amazing the coincidences here that we're learning about the Somali refugees and their ability to really make good here in America with all of the tools and levers available to them. I'm sure they went to class and learned from the political party that they tend to back, the Democrats, and they've learned how to really game the system. So here's a Voice of America article back in 2017. The headline is Immigrants, Refugees Revive Depressed Neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. About 2 kilometers away from Saraga Grocery is Juba Value Center Mall, where Somali refugees and immigrants have small shops and help each other bring in new customers. Columbus has the second largest Somali community in the U.S. after Minneapolis. The influx of refugees and immigrants kept the population of the Northland area from declining in the first years of the new millennium. From 2007 to 2012, immigrant entrepreneurship rose citywide by 41.5%. Native-born entrepreneurship declined by 1.2% during the same period. All right, so that's Columbus, Ohio. That's 8 years ago. About the burgeoning Somali community that has revived Columbus, Ohio. And you hear how this is written. It's like, you know, the native-borns, they're not entrepreneurs. They're just lazy jerks who sit in their butt and root for the Buckeyes, and they don't do anything. But those Somalis, those hardworking Somalis are entrepreneurs, and they're doing everything they can to revive the economy here in Columbus. God bless them. We'd be nowhere without them. And don't forget, when the fraud story erupted in Minneapolis, we had a statement from the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, who said, yeah, listen, we know there's some fraud out there, but, you know, that's the cost of doing business, right? Yeah, okay. So that was the Voice of America article about, remember, it was called the Juba Travel Agency there on Morse Road, right in the middle of the Somali community in Columbus. Now, fast forward to 2025. Walter Kurt, independent journalist, does his own little story about the Juba Value Center. Walter Kurt posted, this is the listed location of the auditing firm that performed the audits for both the Minnesota and Ohio NGOs linked to potential fraud. Okay, do you hear what's going on here? The NGOs that are getting millions upon millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars that is linked to the vast amounts of fraud in both Minneapolis and Ohio, they submitted paperwork to the government saying, hey, we've been audited, and the auditing firm is located in the strip mall Juba Value Center, which looks like, you know, a Dollar General, you know, like the Temu version of Dollar General. Like, well, let me just say, like the Dollar General version of Dollar General. The Juba Value Center, where you can go in and, you know, get yourself cheap goods for $1 a piece. They also are a travel center and a computer services center. And now apparently they're the auditing firm that gave a clean bill of health to all the Somali-backed businesses in Minnesota and Ohio linked to the fraud. Totally legit. Totally. By the way, the owner of one of these businesses that they're investigating bought a Porsche with cash, with a check. $93,250 worth of Porsche was purchased via personal check by the owner of one of these Somali concerns. And this is the cost of doing business, says Republican DeWine. And there's nothing to see here if you're investigating, you're guilty of white supremacy, says outgoing Governor Tim Walz. This story is just getting started. It's 8:22. It's 8:30. Coming up on the program, we've got much more to get to. We'll give you the latest out of Minnesota with Tim Walz and one other Democrat who's spiraling down the drain. That would be Mark Kelly. Both those feel-good stories coming up next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in. Excuse me, it's 8:36. Look at me going back in time. I loved so much the last 3.5 hours of this program that I wanted to revisit it. You can do the same, by the way. Just subscribe to our podcast and you won't miss a beat. No, it's 8:30. Well, now it's 8:37 after I spoke about my mistake. Also, say a prayer for Julie Gunlock, not feeling well today. She started the show with us, and then she was feeling under the weather, so we hope Julie feels better soon, very soon. It's nothing without her around here, but I'll struggle on until we hand it off to Chris Plant in 30 minutes. Mark Kelly. You'll remember Mark Kelly. If you're not familiar, he's a retired captain from the Navy and an astronaut and served his nation admirably with valor. If you don't remember that, he will remind you at any given moment. You'll remember that he, along with 5 other Democrat members of Congress, put together an ad that suggested, obviously, that President Trump was engaged in illegal activities as the commander-in-chief and was delivering illegal orders to the military. And the ad was to remind members of the military that they must not follow illegal orders. Now, of course, they never gave any example of any illegal order. They never said specifically what they were talking about. It was just tantamount to saying, yeah, you know, would be a real shame, you members of the military, if a new president came in and decided to try you all on war crimes for following illegal orders. Well, yesterday, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth made an announcement regarding Senator Kelly's rank as a retired member of the military, as a retired officer. Secretary Hegseth has announced that Kelly, after what he called seditious statements and a pattern of reckless misconduct, they're taking administrative action against Kelly. The department has initiated retirement grade determination proceedings with reduction of his retired grade resulting in a corresponding reduction in retired pay. To ensure this action, the Secretary of War has also issued a formal letter of censure, which outlines the totality of Captain, for now, Kelly's reckless misconduct. The censure is necessary process step and will be placed in Captain Kelly's official and permanent military personnel file. You see, as a retired member of the military collecting a full military pension, Captain Kelly, Senator Kelly, has certain responsibilities. And if it is determined that he is deliberately undermining the chain of command and debilitating the ability for the military to conduct their operations, well, then he can be brought up on charges, which is exactly what the Secretary of War is doing. Senator Kelly, by the way, is grandstanding, trying to defend himself, trying to throw all these distractions up in the air without actually addressing the specific issue in question here. The next time he sits for an interview with Jake Tapper, who claims he loves the military, Jake Tapper could say, Senator Kelly, we have a perfect example of the military operations under President Trump, the commander-in-chief, and that's the operation in Venezuela. Was that illegal? Did the members of the military who executed that phenomenal raid to apprehend Nicolas Maduro, did they break the law? Should they have defied those orders? What about the National Guard in the streets of our cities? You know, like the National Guardswoman who got murdered in Washington, D.C. just a couple of days after your ad ran. Should the National Guard not be obeying their orders? Be specific. Who should ignore the orders of the commander-in-chief? But, of course, he'll never say that. Friend of the program, Jim Hansen, who is a retired special op dude from the Army, he commented on this and said, what Mark Kelly did was the equivalent of the mafia enforcer saying, nice business you got there, shame if anything happened to it. It's not a direct threat, but everyone knows what it means. It was designed to undermine President Trump. And this is 100% a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. For his part, Senator Kelly did what he always does, hide behind his uniform. Here was his response yesterday, cut 17.
I've got a question for you. How many generations of Donald Trump's family have served in the military? 0. Now, for me and my family, service to our country is in my blood. My great-grandfather served in the U.S. Navy after immigrating from Ireland. Both of my grandfathers served during World War II. Both of my parents wore uniforms. My dad in the 82nd Airborne.
Yeah. All right, fine. It's disgusting what they do when they do this. I'm sorry. How many generations of the Biden family served? Oh, that's right. Beau Biden served. According to Joe, he actually died in combat in Iraq, although that's a lie. Hunter served until he was dishonorably discharged. But no, Mark Kelly would love that. And what about the Obama family? How many generations there served? Pick and choose whatever you'd like. You can't hide from what you said. And forget about the ad that they put out, which was carefully legalese and parsed and deliberated, and they made sure that they went right up to the line of insubordination without actually violating the law. What about what he said on the floor of the Senate? It's pretty cut and dry, and it's pretty clear. Take a listen. Cut 18. This is him just a couple of months ago.
But during my career, I never saw a president command the Department of Defense to do things that I felt were outside the boundaries of what we would consider legal action against illegal action against people. If you're the guy that is pulling the trigger in a combat operation, you typically expect that the people above you have done all the due diligence necessary to make sure that you are not going to be in some kind of legal jeopardy. And I really worry about that today. There might be some young Navy lieutenant out there, or Marine Corps captain, or Air Force, for all I know, MQ-9 operator, that might someday find out that they have done something that is not consistent with the law and are now in legal jeopardy.
Absolutely outrageous and despicable words from a man who absolutely knows better, just to promote his own lamentable, pathetic political career. He's using junior officers in our military as tools, as weapons, to try to harm Donald Trump because he's not man enough to do it himself. He deserves everything that's coming to him right now legally from the Pentagon. It's 8:44.
This afternoon on the Derek Hunter Show, Democrats are going to hate you anyway. We might as well make fun of them in the process. 3 o'clock on WMAL.
Speaking of Mark Kelly, let's not forget, and this will always be part of the Mark Kelly story. In the summer of 2024, in the midst of the presidential campaign, Kamala Harris, the nominee for the Democrats, you remember her. She was handed the nomination without having to earn one vote. She was handed a $1 billion war chest without having to raise one penny. Yeah, that Kamala Harris. When it was time for her to make her single most important decision as a candidate that would shed light on what we could expect from her decision-making process as the commander-in-chief and the leader of the free world, Kamala Harris evaluated the choices in front of her for running mate. Pete Buttigieg, she decided, was too gay. Josh Shapiro, too Jewish. It was down to Mark Kelly and Tim Walz. Tim Walz, by the way, as far as I know, not Jewish. The other thing, jury's still out. So Kamala Harris is evaluating Mark Kelly, senator from Arizona, and Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, and she decides that Tim's the guy. Tim's the better man. Tim's the better choice. Tim's more reliable. Tim's more responsible. Tim Walz is the guy to be one heartbeat away from the presidency. That Mark Kelly guy, something weird about him. Nah, he's not the guy. Can't trust him. That Mark Kelly will always have to live with that. That Tim Walz got selected over him. How humiliating. Especially considering the fact that yesterday Tim Walz dropped out of his bid for re-election as governor of Minnesota. This is the bluest state in the union. Last time Minnesota voted for a Republican president in the Electoral College was 1972, Richard Nixon. They couldn't even bring themselves to vote for Ronald Reagan when 49 other states did. But Tim Walz found himself on the losing prospect of re-election. And the Democrat elder statesman, Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota senator for sure, probably Chuck Schumer, Who knows, maybe even Barack Obama and Kamala Harris picked up the phone and virtually tapped Tim on the shoulder and said, "You're done here, pal. Timmy, time to sit down, because we can't afford you losing this race." By the way, not only can we not afford you losing the race for re-election in 26, but we can't afford you being in the public eye, forcing every other Democrat running in 2026 to have to answer for you, to have to defend you, to have to answer the question, what do you think of Tim Walz and the fraud in the state of Minnesota, where Democrats get to do whatever they want. It's not quite as uniparty and one-party rule as Democrats in California, but it's pretty damn close. And Tim Walz has been able to enact the utopia dream of left-wing Marxist Democrats in America. And what's the result? Billions of dollars in fraud, as far as the eye can see. And when the investigations began and the media started to look at it, what did Tim Walz say? Well, he said you were a racist for looking at that. How dare you? Yeah, the walls are closing in on Tim Walz so badly that he had to drop out of his bid for re-election. And according to Nathan Grage, who is a investigative reporter in Minnesota, Dustin joined us earlier today. He's a columnist at Town Hall. He said that according to his sources, and his sources are pretty solid there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that Amy Klobuchar will be running for the Democrat nomination and running for governor of Minnesota. And upon which time she wins that election in November of this year, then she, as the new governor, will name Tim Walz as the senator replacement for her seat. Amazing how they take care of their own, isn't it? So maybe this isn't the last we've seen of Tim Walz, but either way, it's incredible sweet justice for this pathetic individual who, thanks to the brilliance of Kamala Harris, was dangerously close to being one heartbeat away from the White House. It's 8:52.